G'day, Dave here, and we're going to be looking at Philippians chapter 2. And we're going to be looking at this issue of competition. Competition can be a great thing. I love sport, I love playing games, I like things where there are winners and runners-up and losers and so on. I think I'm often the loser. But the reality is that while there's a good place for competition, there is also an ugly side to it. And I think the ugly side to competition comes from a sense of entitlement, that we believe that we deserve to be number one, that we deserve to come out the winner, that we should have at other people's expense. And it also comes from a belief in scarcity, and sometimes a very accurate belief in scarcity. I mean, think about sport, for example. The desire to win, the desire to come out on top, knowing that there can only be one winner, there can only be 3 on the podium, there can only be 4 in the finals, and so on. Scarcity drives that competition. It's true of school, it's true of university. You come out at the end of year 12 with a rank. Your rank is a competitive thing. You are competing with those above you, you're competing with those below you, and based on the rank that you get, you will either occupy some of those scarce university positions or you won't. So there's a desire to get, and there's this reality of scarcity. And when it comes to understanding these things from a Christian perspective, understanding what a Christian relationship is like, what it's like to relate to God and to be part of His church, these ideas of entitlement and scarcity get absolutely challenged. And we see it here in Philippians chapter 2. You might like to read with me. Picking it up at verse 1, "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from His love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in mind." We'll just pause there. You see, in the opening verse, he's building an argument, and he's pointing to what Christians have. That is, they are united with Christ. They have received His love. They share in the Spirit of God. They've received tenderness and compassion from God. These are the realities for every Christian. You can't be a Christian without being united to Christ, without sharing in His Spirit, without receiving the tenderness and the love of God, and that unites us to God and to each other. And he is asking them to consider this. He says, if you have any encouragement from these things, and that is, you've got to remember, hey, I'm united with Christ. I belong to Christ. I'm connected with other people who are also united with Christ. God sees me now in Christ, not simply on my own. God sees me as a forgiven sinner, as somebody who's been declared right, and not as His enemy any longer. He sees me as one in whom He dwells by His Spirit, and not only in me, but in the other Christians around about me. God's Spirit dwells in each of us and unites us together as one with Christ. And we see here that we have also shared a common love and gentleness and compassion from God. So what he's saying in effect is, Christian or Christians, realize what you've got and be encouraged by it. In other words, God has given you so much. He's given you all that you need. There's no scarcity here, all right? And because there's no scarcity here, and because He's already made you a winner, you don't need to compete in Christian relationships. So he says, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in mind. It's literally here being of one mind, one love, one spirit, and one mind. We are connected together. There's a unity that comes in Christ where we are on the same level, but it's not a level down there. It's a level elevated into relationship with God Himself. Each and every one of us, all recipients of God's tenderness and compassion, of His love, of His mercy, all united together by the Spirit in Christ with God. And he says, make my joy complete by living that out. Actually, putting that knowledge into practice. So, as you know what you've got in Christ, think that, be like-minded. As you've received all this love from God, then practice that love as one. As you have participated and shared in the Spirit of Christ, then be one. Actually live that out in your thinking and in your actions. That's what he wants to see. See, if we are united with Christ, we've been given everything. And that should shape our relationships with each other. And then he goes on to put a very practical edge to this. He says, verse 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. In other words, you're not entitled. You don't deserve what you get from God. You don't have privileged position in relation to others around about you. No, you are not to act out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility, value others above yourselves and don't look to your own interests first, but to the interests of others. How can you do that? Well, you can do that, you see, if you know that there's plenty to go around. That God's love, that his compassion, that being united in Christ, that sharing in his Spirit is boundless. You don't have to compete with each other. You can do that if you realise that you're not number one. You're not the most entitled person. No, that role belongs to God. But he's privileged you. He's been gracious to you. He's reached out to you. And so he's brought you into a place of abundance with him. So that ought to lead to humility, to gratitude and thankfulness. And that, of course, is to shape our relationships with each other. Sadly, we don't always see that. We see competition. We compare ourselves to those around about us. We complain and we grumble and we criticise because others seem to get more attention than we do. We compare ourselves and compete between churches. That church is bigger. That church has a better children's ministry. That church has a fantastic music program. Hey, they do better videos than that church down the street. We compete and we criticise and we divide. And in doing that, we fail to realise what we have in common, what we've been given together, how we've received the same mercy, rich, deep mercy from God. And that ought to see us not in competition with each other, but in joyous, enthusiastic, humble, rejoicing in each other doing well. You see, it's not for me to lift myself in the people of God at other people's expense. No, the attitude that we see, and we're going to see that next time, of Jesus, is that he'll actually give up his rights. He'll give up what is his for the sake of others and doing what is absolutely best for those around about him. Friends, that's the attitude that we're called to. That's the life for Christians. That's what churches are to be like. Not places of competition and conflict, but places of joyful oneness where we look to put others before ourselves because we know that we've received everything that we need from God.